Hey guys, and welcome to my channel. Today's video, I'm talking about the best horror books of 2022. First of all, I just need to start off this video by showing you that I'm wearing my Stephen King shirt because, listen, Stephen King quote tweeted me, and listen, that is all I need in life. I think I'm done. I'm going to print that. I'm going to put it on my gravestone. I'm going to just never forget about it. Anyway, let's get into my favorite books of 2022. There were actually a lot. I had a great reading year. I didn't read as much as I wanted to. I didn't hit my goal of 50, but I'm at like 39, I think. But you know what? It's not a competition, okay? I'm doing this in no particular order because I couldn't be bothered. So there's no rhyme or reason to this list. These are just my favorite standout reads of the year. I kicked off 2022 reading No Exit by Taylor Adams, and that quickly became one of my favorite thriller reads ever because it is just so much fun. It's so fast-paced. It's so shocking and twisty and a little over the top, but it felt like a 90s, early 2000s thriller movie that I would love. So I just had a blast with it. The main character is incredible. It's about a young woman who's traveling during a snowstorm and she pulls into a rest stop and she learns that there's a girl tied up in someone's van, but she doesn't know whose van it is. And she has to figure that out. Boy, does she. Another favorite read of 2022 is Stephen King's Misery. This book was intense. I feel like you feel the pain that, what's his name? Paul. You feel the pain that Paul Sheldon goes through in this book, and it's long and drawn out what he goes through. Misery is about a famous writer like Stephen King who gets into a car crash and he's saved by his biggest fan, Annie Wilkes. And Annie Wilkes happens to be a little mentally unwell, and she decides that she wants Paul to write a book involving her favorite character that Paul Sheldon killed off. So he's forced to write this story for her and basically live out her fantasies, and she fucking tortures him and psychologically tortures him as well as physically tortures him. And it's scary because Paul Sheldon is so hopeless and helpless, and you're just like, damn, if I was in that situation, I think I would just give up because there's no way I could deal with that. Interesting because there's the famous hobbling scene from the movie is not the same as it is in the book. I think it's a little worse in the book. I mean, they're both pretty terrible. But anyway, it was just such it was such a dreadful read. It just captures the essence of winter, I think. Another favorite read of the year is The Grown Up by Gillian Flynn. I miss Gillian Flynn. I need her to write more books. And The Grown Up was just a nice short taste of what I've been missing. It's about this young woman, she's a con artist, and she meets this woman who comes in and tells her that she thinks that there's a malevolent spirit in their home and she's messing with her son. So our main character goes there to like take care of it, and it goes to unexpected places. It was darkly funny. If it does not pull you in by the first line, this book is not for you. Like, I knew immediately the first line, I was like, yes, this is my vibe. This is the energy I need. So snarky and sarcastic, and I just love it. And I love Gillian Flynn. I need more of her in my life, okay? I'm like really liking this purple light situation behind me. Another favorite read for me in 2022 is Gone to See the Riverman by Kristopher Triana. This book is on disturbing books lists for a reason. It gets extremely disturbing. So the story centers on a young woman who's kind of obsessed with this serial killer in prison, and she has a relationship with him, and he asks her to complete this task for him, go get some keys somewhere and see the riverman. So she takes her sister, who's disabled, I believe. She takes her sister with her along this journey. It's a dark journey, and you learn about our main character's past and her relationship with her sister and her brother, and it gets really dark. And I was not expecting it to really focus on this woman's life and her relationships and the trauma within her family, but that's a main focus of the story. It was really hard to read, but I could not put it down. I had to find out what happened and just how this woman's mind worked. And you kind of realize, okay, this is why she has this relationship with this serial killer. She's not so innocent herself. And it's just really dark. And it's really good. I thought it was really well written. Another favorite read of the year is Below by Laurel Hightower. So last year, Laurel Hightower's Crossroads was one of my favorites of the year. Below is no different. I love Laurel Hightower. I feel like she can create characters that feel rich and lived in and relatable. You just connect with them immediately within such a short time frame, and Below is no different. We're following a character who's driving cross country. She's going through a divorce and a lot of inner turmoil. She's very insecure. She meets this dude on the road. He's a trucker, and they kind of hit it off, and then they get into an accident, and she decides, is she gonna risk her life to save this stranger she doesn't really know, or is she gonna go get help? Whatever. But also, while this is happening, there's a creature flying around basically attacking her, and this creature might be a Mothman, and it might go to crazy places. There's some subterranean horror stuff in this that gave me The Descent vibes. I loved it. I love that there was just a lot of claustrophobic feelings in this. I love that our character, there's a lot of claustrophobic feeling within her. Like, she feels like she's trapped in her situation and she's trying to get out. Just how she has all this abusive trauma and she has all these thoughts about herself from her ex-husband that were pretty dark and abusive, and she's trying to escape that. There's just a lot going on, and I loved it. I loved the layers to the story, and it's very short. I need Laurel Hightower to come out with a full-length novel, please. Her stories are very emotional and very human focused with a supernatural twist. Another favorite read of the year, which is another disturbing read, and that is The Laws of the Skies. This is a novella about a group of kids who are on a field trip with a few adults, and they get lost in the woods and things go horribly, horribly wrong. The stuff that happens to these kids, I'm just like, aren't you 8? How do you know how to do this? There's a lot of blood in this. There's a lot of violence. It reminded me very much of Lord of the Flies, Tucker and Dale versus Evil, but much, much darker, and it's just haunting. It's hard to read because the stuff that's happening is happening to children, and there's just a scene towards the end that's really rough to read. Yeah, I couldn't put it down. Give me those messed up vibes to stimulate anything within me, any emotion, because I need all the help I can get. Another favorite read of the year, which is surprising for me because I don't like this author, is Home Before Dark by Riley Sager. I loved it. I loved it so much. It's basically about a young woman who grew up in a haunted house, an infamous haunted house like the Amityville Horror, and her family wrote a book about their experience and they became famous off of it. Years later, her dad died and he left the house to her in her name. So she goes to the house to renovate it and kind of deal with her demons of the past. I love this book because it's very much a mixture of the Amityville Horror and the Haunting of Hill House TV show, and it's just filled with some really cool moments. I love that there's a lot of ambiguity to it where you don't know what's happening, if it's real or not. I love that it really is centered on haunted house tropes. It doesn't really try to do anything too exciting or crazy, and I love that it's filled with those cliches. I feel like it's an homage to those types of stories, and I thought it was executed very well. Another book I've read in 2022 that I loved is Did You Hear What Eddie Gein Done? So this is basically a graphic novel about Ed Gein, the serial killer. I think he only killed like one person actually in his life, his childhood up until his adulthood and into the violent acts of murder that he committed. If you don't know, Ed Gein is the inspiration behind Leatherface and Texas Chainsaw Massacre. He's the inspiration behind Buffalo Bill in Silence of the Lambs, Norman Bates in Psycho. He was a dark dude, and this book kind of enlightened me to his childhood, which was very abusive and just really sad. And you kind of understand, okay, this is why he became the person he was. His mother had a huge influence on his views towards sexuality and his views towards women, and it really messed him up. It's sad. It's really sad how his life turned out, and it feels weird to feel sadness for a killer, but this book did a really great job at making you feel a little bit of empathy. It was a really interesting story, and the artwork is incredible, and I highly recommend it. Another favorite read of 2022 is Just Like Mother. This book is basically Rosemary's Baby, but more modernized. And I feel like it is the best homage to Rosemary's Baby without basically copying Rosemary's Baby. So it centers on a young girl who grew up in a cult with her cousin. They escaped when they were younger and they went on to live separate lives. They reunite years later as adults and they basically discover what each other is like. And one of them is super successful and rich, and she has this weird doll company, and it's just very culty and weird. And the book book, it examines motherhood and how women are often kind of meant to feel like they have to be mothers when they grow up, or there's something wrong with them if they choose not to be a mother. And it's all about women's choice, women's right to choose, and a lot of stuff like that. And it examines trauma within families, and you slowly learn about the cult's life that they were living in, and it's dark and there's a lot of tension and dread. You know it's building up to something, and when it gets there, it's shocking, and it was just super entertaining for me. I really loved it. Another favorite read of 2022 is Dark Matter, which I would kind of describe it as more sci-fi horror, psychological, I don't know. So there's a lot of science-y shit that happens in this book that's really hard for me to describe, but it's about this really smart dude who's like a scientist or something. He's walking home from a bar one night and he gets hit over the head and kidnapped, and he wakes up in a weird situation, possibly a different timeline, a different world. Slowly starts to investigate what's happening, and he's trying to get back to his wife and child. This one is just, it's very like edge of your seat, intense and scary in the real life sense, where you're like, oh my god, if this happened to me, what would I do? It's scary to think of yourself removed from the only life you know and thrust into another one and not being able to get out of that situation. It's scary. It's like that trapped feeling, that claustrophobic feeling. It was really fun to read, and I could not stop. I couldn't put it down. It was a page turner for me. Another favorite read of 2022 is Brother by Ania Ahlborn. Ahlborn? I can't say her name correctly. Basically, this is like the Texas Chainsaw Massacre, but a coming of age story. If like Leatherface, if you were examining his coming of age. It's about a young boy who's living in this family of cannibals, basically. They're messed up, they're dark, they're disturbing, and he seems different from them. And you're just kind of learning how he's coping with this and how he's living with them, how he's trying to get out of the situation, and it gets really, really dark. And the characters, his mother and his brother, are some of the most despicable characters I've ever read about. They're horrible, and what they do is just horrendous, and I love that this story is very bleak and dark, and it doesn't let up. It's bleak the whole way through, and you're just sitting there by the end, you're like, I gotta put on some cartoons or something, because it's just sad. Oh! Another favorite read of the year is Clown in a Cornfield 2, Frendo Lives by Adam Cesare. I loved this one. I think I loved it a lot more than the first book, which I also loved. So this basically is the sequel to Clown in a Cornfield 1, and it's set like a year after the events of the first one, where we're following the survivors from the first one and how they're coping with that and how they're dealing with PTSD and all of that trauma, as well as the infamy that comes with surviving a situation like that. It was still incredibly violent. I've seen some people say that the kills weren't that good in this. Some of the kills in this were so gruesome that I was shocked. I was like, how did he get away with this for a young audience? Like, there's one specific scene where I just keep replaying it in my head because it was gruesome. And I feel like, did you even read the book if you think the kills weren't as good? I feel like it's just really interesting. I like that we explored different people in the town and how the town has reacted to the event, and it was just a solid slasher read. I wouldn't really call it a slasher, but we're gonna get a third Clown in Cornfield, and I'm excited. I will read whatever. And we're also getting a movie from the people behind Smile, the horror movie that is my number 2 favorite movie of 2022. So I'm excited. I will read whatever Adam Cesare comes out with next. I feel like he just gets it. We're on the same vibe, the same wavelength. His writing is my vibe, and I feel like it's very nostalgic, and that's what I need. Okay. Another favorite read of the year is What Moves the Dead by T. Kingfisher, which is basically a retelling of The Fall of the House of Usher by Edgar Allan Poe, which I have not read. Basically, this one is very atmospheric, it's very gothic, it's very weird and creepy, but also funny at times. The characters are really unique and just, they feel real. Another favorite read of the year is Just Like Home by Sarah Gailey. I actually read this for Gabby Reed's book troop pick in October. We had a live discussion on that, and that was really fun, and we both really liked the book. And I will tell you, this book was surprising to me because I didn't expect to like it as much as I did. This centers on a young woman who moves back to her childhood home to care for her dying mother, and the home, basically, a lot of bad stuff happened in her home when she was a child involving her dad, and I don't really think that's a spoiler because that's on the synopsis. So the book, you're basically learning about the dynamic between this mother and daughter, and you're discovering discovering what happened in her childhood, the really dark, disturbing things that happened, and how it has affected this woman later in life. The relationship with her mother is so messed up. I was so uncomfortable to read some of the moments between them because you just felt like they were moments you shouldn't have been reading. You shouldn't have been in on that moment. It was a private moment where this mother is just, she is awful to the daughter, and the things she says to her, the way she treats her, you're just like, oh my god, like I have to leave. I want to go home now. A few people say it's like when you're at a friend's house and the friend starts getting yelled at by their parents. It's just an uncomfortable feeling. But I couldn't stop. Like I had to know what they were talking about, what was going to happen. And it goes to very bonkers, bizarre places towards the end, but I liked it. I like what it did. It was unique, it was new, and it was unexpected. Surprise me, thrill me. That's what I want. I want weird. I want surreal and doesn't make sense. I want to be confused sometimes. And that's what this book did to me for the end. I just really loved it. I loved the relationships. The family relationships were so interesting to me. And it was also sad. It was a sad read about trauma and familial abuse and all of that fun stuff. So another fave of the year is Reception by Kenzie Jennings. This is a cannibal horror book. It's about a young woman who is going through something. She kind of had a mental breakdown and she's in a facility to get better, and she leaves the facility to attend her sister's wedding. And the wedding goes horribly wrong when like cannibalistic stuff starts happening. And it is wild. I loved the dynamic between the two sisters. Their relationship was so, it felt real. Like I was reading about real sisters and seeing their relationship. Once it got to the cannibal stuff, the story picked up and it became really dark and gruesome and just fast-paced, and you're like rooting for this girl and her sister to get out of the situation alive, and it was just really entertaining to me. It felt very much like Ready or Not with cannibals. And the last book of 2022 that made my best of list is The Vessel by Adam Nevill. This book is another one that surprised me. I wasn't expecting to like it as much as I did. It centers on a woman who is kind of down on her luck. She's going through a rough situation with her ex, and she's trying to care for her young daughter, and she's trying to get herself into a better living situation. So she takes this job caring for this old woman, this elderly woman with dementia, and the situation becomes something she didn't expect. And this woman's home is very just, it's like a hoarder lives there, and there's something off about this woman in this situation. And the lead character kind of delves into this woman's past, and you learn things about her over the course of the story. And over the course of the story, you're also learning about this woman's life and her relationship with her ex, and just you learn about a lot of the dark stuff that she's been through. I found the lead character to be really empathetic. She's someone you root for, and you wanted her to get out of this situation because she's gone through so much. It felt very cinematic in a way, and I guess it was because this was originally intended to be a screenplay, but the way it moves seamlessly from scene to scene, and I can visualize everything perfectly in my head. It was just this house, it feels so cold and dark and dreary, and just I could feel the dust in the air almost, and just how it's cluttered with stuff, and it just felt claustrophobic to read. And then it ends with a very weirdly uplifting, emotional end, which I did not expect. It went to surprising places towards the end, and overall, I really enjoyed it. I feel like it's a very layered story, and it also had some really creepy moments. Some notable mentions for 2022 are Such Sharp Teeth by Rachel Harrison. This one was light on the horror stuff, but it's basically a werewolf story about this young woman who returns to her hometown to be with her pregnant twin sister, and she gets attacked by an animal and she slowly starts turning into a werewolf. But it's really kind of about her coming to terms with her trauma from her past, her figuring out her identity, and struggling with her not having control over her body. And there's a lot of interesting parallels between that and her twin sister who's pregnant and kind of feeling the same things. It was really unique, and it also focuses on a romance plot where the main character, she's trying to determine if she wants to stay in this town and settle down with this guy who's amazing. Like, I wish he was real and he would be for me. Like, that's what I want. I was reading it, I was like, this is my fantasy. Like, give me this, please. Ghost Eaters by McLeod Chapman was also really good. It's really dark and bleak. It centers on a girl who, she gets into this weird ass drug after the death of her best friend who overdosed on it. And she gets pulled into this strange world where she can see ghosts and she becomes haunted by them. It was an allegory for depression and addiction. It's very, very dark and dreary read. It's not uplifting, and I just think that it is horrifying in a different way, in a real way. Anyway, those are my thoughts on everything I read in 2022. Overall, a really great year, a lot of great books. I read a lot of newer books this year, which I'm proud of myself because I tend to read older books. I really want to read more of the books on my shelves in 2023, so we'll see how that goes. And I'm looking forward to the rest of the new books that are coming out in 2023 because there's a lot coming out that I really want to read. We're getting a new book by Nick Cutter, so we'll have that in 2023. Let me know what were your favorite reads in 2022, if you liked any of the books that I talked about, and let me know what you're looking forward to reading in 2023. Thank you so much for watching, guys. I will catch you next time. Bye.